All right, we're going to look at factoring trinomials using what we call a Punnett square method. First of all, we draw what you may have seen before in science if you studied some units in genetics, a square divided into 4 segments or 4 quarters. It's important when you're factoring to put the numbers that I've outlined in the question, 10, negative 19, and positive 6, the leading coefficient on the x squared, the coefficient on the x, and the constant in the right positions. I always start my graph or my Punnett square by placing a line to the right of it, a plus sign below that line, and an equal sign off to the right. The 10, which is the leading coefficient, always needs to go in the top left. The 6, which is positive 6, I'm not going to put the sign in, but if it was negative 6, I would include the sign, always needs to go in the bottom right. And minus 19 goes to the right side of the equal to sign. Now on top of this line that I've drawn to the left, I'm going to put the product of the two numbers that I placed in my Punnett square, the 10 and the 6. So if I multiply 10 times 6, I get 60. Now the next step, I'm going to list all my factors of 60. So I'm going to do this consecutively so that I don't randomly start picking numbers and then miss a pair of numbers that could be the ones that I'm looking for to solve this trinomial. So first of all, I start with 1 times 60 and move my way up. 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15, 5 times 12, 6 times 10. Now, 7 doesn't go into 60 evenly, neither does 8 or 9. So 6 and 10 would be my last two factors of 60. And once I get to two numbers that are close together, usually I'm done. The next step is to find one of these pair of numbers that I can place in these two positions up top that will generate 19. And if I look at my numbers, I'm going to do it always by adding. And of course, the first 2, 3, those ones don't work. But when I get to 4 plus 15, I notice that I've got a match for 19. So I'm going to put the 4 and the 15 in those two positions. However, there's still something wrong with the equation, as you can see that I'm supposed to get negative 19 and not positive 19. What I'm allowed to do is I am allowed to change the signs of either one of the numbers or even both, if need be, to make it work. And if I do change 4 and 15 to both to be negative 4 and negative 15, they will add up to negative 19. And the final check that's very important before I place these two numbers into the Punnett square is they also need to multiply to give me 60. And sure enough, negative 4 times negative 15 does still give me a positive 60. So I know I've found the two numbers that are going to work. I'm going to place these two numbers into the Punnett square. And it doesn't matter which two boxes they occupy. So I put negative 4 in the top right, negative 15 in the bottom left, but I could have reversed those. Now the next step I do is I'm going to find the GCF horizontally and vertically for each pair of numbers that I've got in my Punnett square. And what I mean by that, the greatest common factor between each pair of numbers. So horizontally, if I look at my first two numbers, 10 and negative 4 going across the top of my Punnett square, the biggest number that goes into both would be 2. And I'm going to put that outside the square to the left. Then I'm going to take care of the next two, which are 15 and 6, negative 15 and 6. And the biggest number that goes into both of those it would be the number 3. Finally, I go down, 10 and 15. 5 is the biggest factor that would go into both 10 and 15. And finally, the GCF for 4 and 6 would be 2. Now, before I go on to the final step, I want to put my signs in place. The sign of the outside numbers, the GCFs that I just wrote in, are dictated by the signs of the numbers that are closest to them in the Punnett square, those 3. The green 6 in this case isn't going to affect any signs outside, but if the 4 is -4 inside the Punnett square, then that 2 right above it would also take on the negative sign. The 10 is positive, so both the 5 and the 2 that are next to it would be positive. And finally, my 15 is negative, so my 3 becomes negative. I'm now ready to write up my answer. Underneath the original question, when I factor a trinomial, I usually get 2 binomials multiplied together. And it's important to know that to generate an x squared in the first term position, you need an x in the first term of your binomial and an x in the first term of your second binomial. And the only thing that I do in order to accomplish that is when I read my numbers going across the top of my Punnett square, I place an x next to the first number and read it horizontally as 5x minus 2. That would be my first binomial. And then vertically, I place an x next to the first number vertically as well, the first GCF that I've got, which is 2, and I would read that going down like a book as 2x minus 3. That would be the solution to the factoring of the trinomial 10x squared minus 19x plus 6.